Hello, everyone. I think we are live. Hi, welcome to this special online event introducing TWT 21, Building Power from the Ground Up. My name is Hope. I'm on the steering group of The World Transformed, and I'm so excited to be with you all tonight here and to hear from a fantastic lineup of energizing speakers. So in case you haven't heard, and I hope that you have heard, The World Transformed 21 is just 4 days away. 4 days away. So from Saturday through to Tuesday of next week, thousands from across the movement will be participating in a packed programme of political discussions, debates, workshops, trainings, games, performances, parties, and so much more. We'll be strategising about the future of the left, forging new organising networks, and discussing necessary radical solutions to the greatest challenges we are facing today. But we couldn't quite wait until Saturday, which is why we've put on this special pre-festival event tonight to look ahead at what's to come and get motivated and hyped for TWT 21. There's still time to get your tickets for the festival. So if you haven't yet bought yours and you are intending to come, what are you waiting for? Head online to theworldtransformed.org and get yours now. And if you're still not convinced about joining us, which is fine, you are in the right place. And hopefully tonight's fantastic event will convince you to get that ticket and come along. So before I introduce our brilliant speakers, I just wanted to touch on the context that this year's festival is taking place in. The past year or so has been incredibly tough for so many. The loss of loved ones, the devastating impacts of health inequalities, and soaring levels of precarity and poverty have taken their toll, all while the corporate bosses and the super rich have seen their wealth grow astronomically. Here in the UK, during that time, we have seen the disdain that this government has for working class people and for marginalised communities. And whilst we have seen some inspiring struggles for justice and liberation on the streets, we've also seen a total lack of meaningful opposition within Parliament to the government's increasingly authoritarian agenda. But beyond that, over the past 6 years, in fact, the landscape of British politics has shifted and evolved immensely. So since our first festival, which was back in 2016, TWT has existed through 2 Labour leadership elections, now, of course, a global pandemic. But in that time, the need and the desire also for radical political education has only grown. So since 2016, we've welcomed tens of thousands to TWT events, and we've seen the growth of a network of over 30 local transform groups across the country. And now we're back this year, both in Brighton for an in-person event and online with our first ever 4-day live stream programme, TWT TV, very exciting, for what's going to be our 6th festival. And 18 months on from the start of COVID, after so much isolation and fragmentation, it's more important than ever that our movement comes together. So TWT 21 will be a place to participate in crucial discussions around left strategy and the future of our movement, as well as an opportunity to build up key organising skills. And of course, it'll be an amazing chance to meet and build relationships with comrades across the UK and in the world, in fact, including people that you might have only ever seen on Zoom. How exciting, Zoom people coming to life. Who'd have thought? And, you know, in extremely challenging circumstances this year, a really dedicated team of a handful of staff members alongside dozens of volunteers have worked unbelievably hard to pull off an event that our movement so desperately needs. But in order to do the necessary and vital work of building power from the ground up, we need you to get involved. TWT is nothing without the energy, the ideas, and the passion of our participants. So don't miss out on shaping the future of our movement and join us at TWT 21 to be part of that very important and necessary process. So tonight, we're very lucky to be joined by John McDonnell, Josh Rosami, and Jay McAlevey to share their perspectives on the organising struggles ahead and where our movement goes next. And after each speaker, I'll be sharing some session highlights coming up at the festival related to what the speakers will be discussing to get you excited and ready for TWT 21. So before we get cracking, a few final asks from me. If you can make it to TWT 21, get your festival ticket tonight before we sell out. There's not a huge amount left, so don't wait too long. If you can't make it to Brighton, register for an online pass for our digital programme, which is another fantastic way to be involved. And if you aren't able to participate this year, please do consider supporting us by making a one-off or even better, a recurring donation. This year's festival is one of our most complex to plan yet, hosting both an in-person festival and a programme of online events. Doesn't come cheap, and we rely on contributions from supporters to make the festival and our year-round work possible. So if you are able, please do consider making a donation of any size using the link that I think will be posted on the screen. And finally, we're super grateful to the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung London office for their incredible support for the festival and for this event in particular. So shout out to RLS London. Right, that's enough from me. Let's crack on with our first speaker. I'm super delighted to introduce Labour MP for Hayes and Harlington, long-standing friend of TWT and all-round legend John McDonnell. He's going to talk to us about the current landscape of British politics and why it's so vital for our movement to come together at conference and at TWT. So over to you, John.
Thanks, Hope. Thanks. Let me just explain for those people who normally see me on Zooms, I'm not in my familiar place. I'm actually squatting in Richard Bergen's room, who's sitting over in the corner here, because my room is so piled up with stuff, I just can't get in it anymore. Anyway, look, TWT, let's talk about the role of TWT. It is the most exciting element of Labour Party conference, and actually it is the focus of a lot of our work that we do through the year. So it's where we come together, we discuss the issues that are confronting our community, both nationally and globally. But in addition to that, we then work out the strategies for our campaigning for the coming year. So it is actually fundamental to both motivating people, of course, exciting people, but also making sure that we are developing the strategies that we need. Just building on what Hope has said, look, we've just been through the COVID pandemic. We're coming possibly slowly out of it, although it may well be a new wave hitting us this winter. One of the issues for us to debate now is the lessons that we've learned as a result of that pandemic crisis, to be honest. And some of the lessons that we've learned about what do we need in terms of our public services. How do we ensure that our public services in the future are fully funded, but properly organised? And part of the work that TWT has always done is listen to people at the front line, the NHS workers, the carers in the residential care homes, all those people who are providing us with those basic levels of services. So some of the lessons we want to learn is what sort of public services do we want in the future? How do we campaign for people working in those services? And how do we ensure that we influence the Labour Party to adopt the policies that we're advocating? That combines analysis, theory, but as importantly, struggle. So how do we engage in those struggles to lift wages, ensure that we get the proper delivery of the services that we need and the proper levels of investment? That's going to be a key feature. But also the issue around COVID, it's global. So one of the key issues that we want to discuss through TWT is what is our role internationally and globally, and the role that we can play in terms of tackling the pharmaceutical industry, the way in which they profiteer at our expense, and even profiteer during a COVID crisis. But then also, so how do we ensure that we're working with movements in the global south so that we're tackling COVID globally, but in a way which enhances equality as well. And that is around the People's Vaccine Campaign. It's also around the ideas that we've got about public ownership of the pharmaceutical industry in the future. And it is also around how we can achieve global equality economically so that, this global south are no longer dependent in the way they can be at the moment on the IMF, the World Bank, and even the UN at times as well. That's one of the issues as we come through the COVID crisis. The other issues then that we want to confront is just, again, what is the future for tackling the next existential crisis? Next existential crisis is climate change, and we've been advocating and discussing through TWT, that's permeated the Labour Party, the whole concept of the Green New Deal. What does that mean in practice? How do we campaign within the Labour Party to ensure that the Green New Deal is firmly established as policy? But more importantly, how do we campaign with those people on the front line, Extinction Rebellion and others, who are trying to ensure that this government is held to account in terms of climate change? And we ensure that we enhance the level of debate and discussion that's taking place within our society about these particular issues. So all of these aspects in terms of how we tackle climate change is about, yes, building a political voice, but also building a social movement that ensures that political voice eventually delivers. And again, it's the global structures that we need to establish as well. How do we work with those campaigns that are taking place across the global south, but also now with the Biden administration being elected, how do we work with our US comrades as well? And it's terrific that we've got Bernie Sanders joining us at the beginning of TWT. And again, learning the lessons from how the left within America has been able to shape the Biden agenda on a number of issues, but also learning the lessons from the struggles that they're having at the moment, because they're not having an easy ride with Biden. They're influencing the agenda. He's dependent on the left for the ideas, but there are struggles that are taking place, both in terms of his own climate change policies, but also in terms of issues around immigration as well. All of that, I think TWT brings us together to build a movement that is international now, but also build a movement that where we learn from one another, from our joint experiences, if you like. That does lead on all those issues, whether it's COVID, our public services, whether it's the Green New Deal and tackling climate change. It does lead on some of the hardest issues that we're facing our communities at the moment. Levels of poverty, and child poverty is such a stain on our society at the moment. And how do we ensure that we, the fifth largest economy in the world, ensure that people have a decent quality of life, no longer live in poverty, or what the UN rapporteur identified as, and it's a word not used in this country for maybe a few generations, people living in destitution. And of course, the immediate challenge is the universal credit cut that's taking place, but also building upon that, the round of austerity that will be imposed upon us by this government if we don't resist in these coming months as the government develops its longer term spending plans and a new budget is created for early next year. So all of those issues around how we tackle the day-to-day poverty of life of many of our fellow citizens are the issues that we have to address. How do we campaign in the short term to prevent people being forced into greater poverty? How do we create a system where people can not just live decent lives, but live fulfilling lives, richness in the broadest sense of the word? And again, a lot of it is about analysis, theoretical discussion, concrete policy debate and policy program analysis, promotion, and then how do we link up with the individual campaigns? And you'll find represented at TWT this year, those people are campaigning straightforwardly on behalf of young people, tackling poverty, those people who are renters, campaigning to make sure people have a decent roof over their heads, that we're campaigning against evictions, making sure that people can, well, just as I said, people can have a decent home. But in addition to that, those people who are particularly in specific aspects where poverty hits the hardest. One of the aspects you'll see this year is around the DPAC, Disabled People Against the Cuts, and how disabled people have suffered under COVID, but the long-term implications of the cuts in welfare that have implicated them. And again, what we'll be doing is seeing how we overcome it, but also more importantly, how do we link up in the social movements that we need to now to campaign on working with them and having campaigning successes as well. All of this, I think, builds up to an absolutely thrilling TWT this year. But it does then lead us on to the issue of the Labour Party. And we have to be honest now, there are struggles in the Labour Party now that will have to take place where we reassert democracy within the party. We're seeing over the last few days, Keir Starmer bringing forward proposals, which basically reduces the role of members and member-level democracy within our party. We're seeing proposals being brought forward that will undermine the democratic debate of policy, let alone the selection of parliamentary candidates or the leader. So again, what we need to do is discuss how do we achieve thoroughgoing democracy within the Labour Party and how do we campaign across the movement to do that. Of course, a lot of this is making sure people are in the Labour Party, and if they're not in the Labour Party, at least we're working with them in a wider build Labour and trade union movement in particular. All of this, I think, makes for this year to be quite critical. We know, losing the election in December 19 was a real blow. We know that. We all suffered as a result of that. But this is when people are really tested. This is when you need to be tested about whether you'll step up to the mark in the difficult times. TWT is doing that. It's actually saying, right, of course it's tough. But actually, this is when we prove ourselves. This is when we can prove we've got the ideas. This is when we prove that we've got the determination and commitment. But as importantly, this is where we prove how we mobilise. And part of the TWT's role this year will be to launch these mobilisations around all these different issues. And one of them will be around democratising the Labour Party and ensuring that the voice of members of the Labour Party is properly heard. And if necessary, yes, challenging leaderships, challenging those who are trying to close down democracy within the party. All of those issues, I think, are up for debate. The one thing about TWT, you come away from it absolutely enthused. And if you had any doubts before you went about a particular concern or a particular issue, you come away convinced that we've got the answers, we've got the ability to change the world, and actually we've got the movement to build. This is around building the social movement that we've wanted for years, and step by step, that's exactly what we're doing. Finally, let me just say this. It's important to book your place now. The demand is increasing all the time. It's important also that we do all we can to support TWT financially. That means, yeah, get your tickets, but also if you can donate, that will be incredibly helpful. Final point is there's a new generation coming into politics at the moment, and that new generation is increasingly radical. We've seen it in all the different social movements that have emerged in the last couple of years, but also I think they have a recognition of what the real priorities are. We face the existential threat of climate change. We face real divisions within our society because of the grotesque levels of inequality. And we face the need to work not just locally and nationally, but globally. I think people recognize that now. That's the theme of everything that TWT is all about. So come along, and hope to see you there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, John. That was a fantastic way to open the session. Always a pleasure to have you speak. And I think, yeah, John's raised a very important challenge for us all. Now is the moment that we have to prove ourselves, guys. So I hope, and I know that everyone watching this can step up to that challenge. And the way that we step up to that challenge is by organising, is by coming together, discussing, planning, strategizing, sharing skills. And that's exactly what we're going to do at TWT. So yeah, thank you to John. And in terms of at the festival coming up this weekend, or the next 4 days of the weekend, it's just some of the kind of session highlights I wanted to mention. We have a whole stream on climate change and mobilising for COP26, which, as John mentioned, is one of the most pressing crises which we have to organise around, including sessions on climate education, winning climate justice, debate on degrowth and or the Green New Deal, and so much more. So you don't want to miss that. And then in terms of socialist strategy, another key kind of like theme of the programme this year, just a few sessions to highlight. We have a really exciting session on socialist strategy after Jeremy Corbyn in this new era. How do we go forward? Sessions on how we understand the right. So how do we understand our enemies, essentially? What effective engagement with the party looks like for socialists. A big old question. I'm sure people here have lots of varying views on, so it'd be great to have that debate. And potentially an even more forthright debate, should socialists leave the Labour Party, is also happening Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. So that's going to be a spicy one. And of course, as has been mentioned, we've got Bernie Sanders in conversation with John McDonnell about where our movement goes next on Saturday at 6 p.m. So yeah, lots to look forward to. That's literally just a taster of what we've got coming up. But next up, I'm going to hand on to our second speaker. So I'm thrilled to introduce artist, writer, and political organizer Josh Rosami, who we've been very lucky to have involved in many TWT events in the past. Always a pleasure. He's going to be talking to us about the current political context from the perspective of anti-racist organising and why struggles against structural racism and state repression should be at the core of left organising going forward. So over to you, Josh.
Let me just unmute myself. That's a classic thing we forget to do. Can you hear me all right? Because I've got a bit of echo.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you for inviting me to contribute today and reflect on the crossroads that we stand at before we immerse ourselves into the amazingness of the world transformed. And I completely echo John, like going to the world transformed in Liverpool was a transformative experience for me. My world was transformed. And the events were amazing, and that was an important part, but the other important part was meeting people and being able to have conversations and just learn and, you know, meet a lot of your heroes and just kind of get into the thick of some of the things we're trying to figure out in the movements and across the left. So yeah, I mean, I highly recommend it. But to the point of the brief of what I had to speak about today, my name is Joshua Rosami. I'm an activist and a writer. I'm born in Hounslow, West London. My family are from Mauritius, East Africa, where most of them still live. And I live and organise mostly in London. I'm part of and have been part of a number of different groups and initiatives, doing stuff around big finance, around climate, housing, racism. So that's kind of a bit of like where I come from, because I'm not as big a name as these other people on this panel. It's kind of hard to know where to start or what can be said of the state of play today that hasn't already been said. I mean, John's touched on it and Hope's touched on it. It's self-evident that we're really at a crossroads with climatic breakdown, with the pandemic, with enduring imperialism, as John noted, and with the onslaught of authoritarian and ethno-nationalist legislation, a lot of which we will have panels about at the festival. And of course, consequent to this legislation, the further criminalizing of poor communities, of migrants, of the left, and very importantly, of collective action. It's also self-evident to me that the community standing at this crossroads, you know, watching prison schools being rolled out for young people who really just need guidance and opportunities, you know, like John was saying, we have such high levels of youth poverty in this country, you know, communities that are watching multinational corporations pollute local land. These are the communities that turned out in their hundreds of thousands to say loudly and clearly that Black Lives Matter. It's self-evident that at these crossroads, we have communities that are prepared to take the action needed to transform the world and to challenge racism and capitalism wherever its head is reared. And I want to say too, and this was also said by John, and it's very true, that I spend a lot of time working and crossing paths with young people. And I want to say that they, more than most, have no intentions of standing still at these crossroads. For them, whenever I do workshops with them and work with them, it's like forward only, no time to wait, radical solutions or nothing. So I'm incredibly excited, and a lot of these people will be at the panels at TWT. So that's another reason to get down there. Maybe you are a young person. I don't know if I'm a young person anymore. It's an existential crisis for me. What does all of this mean for the direction of organising and strategy within the left? I guess when we talk about ground zero for political struggle, you know, where your place in society equals an increased vulnerability to death, we mean the communities with the highest mortality rates from COVID, the communities I live in, where police shoot to kill, where tower blocks burn down because your life has less value than a profit margin on cladding, where young trans people are pushed to suicide because of inadequate access to services, where pollution shrinks our lungs and cuts our life down. We're talking about working class communities, and specifically about communities where the badge of race so viscerally sets the boundaries of where and how you live, your quality of healthcare, your pay grade, your chances of imprisonment, and I mean, to put it simply, your kind of full potential of living as a human being. Ground zero for political struggle, to my mind, is always going head to head with state and institutional racism. My brief for this talk was to kind of talk about anti-racist struggle and the danger, I guess, about speaking about anti-racist struggle, especially for the non-racialized left, is that this is conflated as kind of separate to or alongside workplace struggles or tenant organizing or parliamentary strategies. But to me, the best organizers are those who do not silo lived experience. They see political struggles as chained together in the everyday lives of those in their community and in the flashpoints of where struggle happens. And I think this is an important thing that is going to be explored in a lot of the sessions at TWT. And for these kind of organizers, it's just kind of obvious that countering imperialist discourse, this is important because for the Afghan refugees that are arriving in my neighboring borough who are here and hungry and without proper homes, in order to really challenge that, we have to challenge at a wider scale. We have to think about why people are leaving Afghanistan in the first place. And that fighting for better homes for these communities is also important. For these kind of organizers, it's all completely connected. And this was something that John was alluding to, is that actually the task at hand is to connect these struggles and to recognize that the flashpoints of anti-racist struggle are the flashpoints of class struggle. And I think I just wanted to take stock at this moment in this panel and look back at the recent decades because the high points of revolt can teach us a two thing about Black power, and especially that of racialized youth. And it's important to do because a lot of us are talking about Black Lives Matter, but this doesn't exist in a vacuum. And again, there's a couple cool panels around this that probably Hope is going to shout out after. But this year is 40 years since the Toxteth uprising, since the Brixton uprising, since the Handsworth, Chapeltown, and Moss Side uprisings, where Commonwealth immigrants at the time refused the life that came with the badge of race. What does this tell us about today? You know, like those were the flashpoints where political struggle was at its height. It means that for immigration struggles today, for the right to work, for the right to remain, it means that they must be central to every political strategy. And it's not just 40 years ago, right? Like this year is 10 years since the nationwide riots, which one makes me feel old, but two is a very important moment to kind of pause and take stock. And those were the riots that happened following the police killing of Mark Duggan in Tottenham. It tells us that struggles against police brutality, against the everyday violence of the criminal justice system, the school to young offenders pipeline must be marked. It is these lived experiences that matter deeply to political consciousness. This is the thing we're thinking about when we're in places like DWT. These identities offer avenues to solidarity with one another, you know, to recognition of collective indignation, of collective power. And that, importantly, is the kind of original radical meaning of identity politics. But you know, I wanted to kind of pause and take note of the fact that we're standing in a commemoration of like 40 years and 10 years. But what of more recently? What of the last few years? And I think it's really important if we're talking about anti-racist struggle, a lot of which will be spoken about at the festival, that we speak about the last few years. There's many lessons to learn from our mistakes, as John said. There's lots of ground we know we still need to cover, but we've also been winning, and we've been winning a lot. For every new Tory bill, and there are many that are very frightening, around borders and nationality, around policing, bills around the armed forces, around counter-extremism, around spies, around protest. There's a lot of bills. For all of these bills, there has been a successful anti-racist organizing push to counter that. Well, that happened initially, right? There's been successful organizing around borders. There's been incredible work raising awareness around deportations. There's been stop flights. There's been incredible successful anti-raids. You know, some of the stuff that we've all been sharing across social media, like what happened in Scotland. There's been the BLM protests, the hundreds of local groups, the incredible organizing around Prevent, the work that was done during the Palestine protests to protect young people from being punished for their organizing in their schools. There's the successful work in Manchester to keep police out of schools, to close down secure schools before they, the secure schools being set up by Oasis. There's been work to stop the mega prisons, to end solitary confinement, to deliver decriminalization. And then, of course, what's been incredibly exciting in the last few months is the work to kill the policing bill. I say this to say that anti-racist organizers in Britain have been winning, have been struggling, and have been succeeding in building a movement. And this is why these new legislative pushes, 10 years in prison for defacing statues of colonizers, all that BS about teachers facing disqualification for teaching anti-racist discourse, or in the new policing bill, it makes it punishable for challenging stop and search, which is obviously a counter to the successful movements that have been doing stop and search trainings and awareness raising around knowing your rights. And in the borders and nationality borders bill, there's stuff around criminalizing migrant support work. All of these are direct attack on what we know we must be doing pretty damn well at, right? Which is building agency, consciousness, and power where it matters. And these are the frontiers of political struggle, challenging state and institutional racism, demanding an end to neo-imperialist leeching of the global south that John spoke about, which demand better access to health, better workplace opportunity, which importantly, and a lot of work that's been happening recently that's incredibly important, is demanding accountability from the mass media and cultural institutions, which address the way race, class, gender, and ableism mark out working class communities for abandonment and oppression. These are the places where the left has historically gained the power needed to transform the world. So I guess the final question we have to ask ourselves, sorry, I don't normally speak this much and this fast, so I get really feisty. I guess the question we need to ask ourselves is, how can we do what we do, but do it better and do it bigger? And this is, at the heart of TWT, is how can we be more strategic? How can we build more power? How can we build more coalitions? How can community and workplace organizing be in sync? How can we ensure that the liberal counterinsurgency, which seeks to turn BLM and climate justice into a series of kind of social media confessionals and switched on light bulbs, how do we make sure this doesn't undercut the radicalism which has lurched us forward in this conversation? This is really where TWT comes in. It's about keeping alive that radicalism. And on this point as well, I want to make two final remarks. Anti-racist struggle and anti-racist thinking has been a torchbearer to left organizing in this country. When we couldn't see the wood for the trees with the neoliberal onslaught, it was anti-racist that ordained Thatcherism as a way of understanding that great reordering. In working class communities, often abandoned by the traditional left, it was solid anti-racist and anti-imperialist who galvanized workers to demand more for themselves and for their families back home in the same breath, and to not stand by when police occupied their communities. It was these groups like the Race Today Collective, like the Asian youth movements, like OWAD, who injected radical ideas and discourses into the wider left and demonstrated the incredible power of Black and brown communities resisting. And it is people in these lineages and from these movements that will be at a number of sessions at TWT. In fact, people who organize in those movements and people who will declare that they are part of the lineages of these movements that will be there. So that's very exciting and another reason to get your ticket. This spirit of radicalism, of self-education, of autonomous struggle, of internationalism, of looking at the territory before us, bringing communities with us, is the spirit which, and I know a lot of the people who have volunteered, is the spirit of the people who have pulled together a lot of these sessions at TWT. Learning about, and I'm probably going over time, so I'm just going to try to wrap up now. Learning about and organizing against state repression and state racism is happening. Kill the Bill organizing is happening. It is the core of left organizing strategy for hundreds of grassroots activists. Hopefully what TWT will remind us is that it needs to be at the heart of all left organizing, because it's at the heart of the lives of those in the constituencies we are organizing within. So yes, the naked terror of capitalism is before us, but so too is the community power building. We just need to kind of sharpen our focus and broaden our coalitions. And that is a lot about what TWT is about, by learning and doing. So I'm excited that we're going to be able to think through, strategize, explore, argue, challenge each other at TWT. And see you there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Josh. That was fantastic. Super energizing. And yeah, thank you so much for reminding us of like where we've come from and like radical history and, like struggles of today, but also, as you said, our victories and where we've been able to gain and we've been able to kind of, win and build. And that's exactly what we just need to carry on doing. But as you said, bigger and better and smarter than we have been doing before. So yeah, thank you so much. And in terms of, just pulling out some session highlights related to what Josh was talking about at the festival, we have a really important session on Sarah Everard's State Violence and Gender on Saturday at 3 p.m. A session on Solidarity as Power, Racial Justice, also on Saturday. A really exciting session on Empire, Racism and UK Foreign Policy today. We've got one on dinghies to deportations, resisting the war on refugees and migrants, absolutely essential. Josh talked quite a lot about Kill the Bill organising. Well, we've got a specific session about Kill the Bill called Attack Together, Resisting Together, which I can't wait for. We've got a session on Labour and the carceral state. Again, very important debates and interventions to be made there. We've got a session on abolitionist imagination called The Point is to Change the World, very apt for the world transformed. And finally, we've got an exciting kind of flagship session on the war on terrorism, 20 years on, which Jeremy Corbyn is going to be speaking on. That's on Tuesday. So much to look forward to. Thank you again to Josh. Before we move on to our final speaker, I just want to do a quick shout out to Eamon, who's made a donation on the stream. Very generous. Thank you so much. If anyone else wants to join him and show your support for TWT by donating, it would be absolutely incredible. Okay, so for our final speaker, I'm so excited to introduce organizer, author, and campaign strategist Jane McAlevey, who is calling in tonight from the US, I think at some potentially ungodly hour in the morning. I'm not too sure. So I was one of over 10,000 participants from 11 countries. Sorry, 111, not 11, 111 countries across the world who took part in the recent Organising for Power course, which was led by Jane and hosted by the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, in 12 different languages, no less, 12 different languages. So it was absolutely incredible. So I, for one, I'm so excited to see Jane again and have you here tonight. So without further ado, over to you.
Thank you, Hope, for that lovely introduction. And really, I couldn't be more honored than and challenged by following Josh in particular, and also sharing the stage with Josh and John. And I do want to acknowledge the World Transformed for the ongoing incredible conversation, challenges, opportunities that you are raising at a moment when we know that our spirits are being challenged by the multiplicity of the crises around us, right? People are exhausted, they're tired. And so coming together to strategize with like-minded people, which is what the World Transformed is really, really important in moments like this, when we see the climate crisis, racist attacks on Black people, and many more across the world. I also want to give a shout out to Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung in general, and also for sponsoring that course that Hope was a part of, along with almost 10,000 other people this summer, and also to Rosa Luxemburg in London. So how to add to what the two previous speakers, what John and Josh highlighted. I mean, a couple of things are, the first I want to say that they both raised really centrally important issues. You know, Josh talked a lot about the intersection of race and class and the need to integrate these issues fundamentally together, which I could not agree more with. If we silo, if we separate, we are missing the chance to build the kind of power that will actually overcome the opposition of the United States within the Democratic Party to forces like the Bernie Sanders forces, and to overcome challenges presented by the witch hunts taking place in the United Kingdom in your own Labour Party. So we have to sort of get out of our silos and understand that in order to actually build durable, serious power, which is what is required now, we have to integrate the strategies. So I'm going to say a little bit more about that. And in terms of John's comments about, he raised the question of public ownership of pharmaceuticals, and we're coming off of one more slap in the face, by the way, by the Biden administration, just in the past few days, where the Democratic Party mainstream, by which I mean the corporate class, who has taken control still of the United States Democratic Party, just destroyed an attempt to have pharmaceuticals regulated by the Medicaid and Medicare program, by the closest thing we get to sort of an attempt at state ownership of healthcare, which, is for the elderly class in the US. So we've just seen another attempt where the pharmaceutical industry, took another win. And as a result, there will be people dying for lack of drugs in this country. I mean, in the United States, it's just completely preposterous. So I'm going to go back and forth between the challenges that are linked, frankly, between the United Kingdom and the United States, because there are so many parallels. But I'm also going to touch on a little bit what's happening around the world, because in terms of the trade union movement, because our challenges are not unique, right? What's happening in the United Kingdom, the profound attack on workers of all ethnicities, which comes via the attack on trade unions and in many other forms. The attacks that are taking place in the United States just came from a briefing yesterday about how in the state of California, a state that often sets the political landscape for the United States, there will be not one, not two, but 3 different measures that the right wing is planning already to put on the ballot, the sort of citizen, quote unquote, ballot in California in 2022, which seek to end collective bargaining, period, for the public sector, the entire public sector, which will attempt to create vouchers to destroy what's left of the public education system, which frankly is fundamental to maintaining a democracy, as are unions, as are a free press, as are free and democratic political parties. So there are challenges all around, and I'm going to touch on a few of them. And I look forward to, I'll be returning for a session on Sunday at the World Transformed. I'm looking forward to that already, getting into a discussion with some of the really bright and fabulous trade union leaders that you have emerging in national positions in the United Kingdom right now. So there's challenges, and everything I say comes from two sort of places. One is my practical experience as an organizer for 30 years. And I think part of the worldview I have as a trade union organizer is that I began as a student organizer. I then did environmental justice organizing when I was a very young organizer. I then went to Central America to work against US foreign policy in Latin America and in Central America. And it was through those experiences that I then came home to what I call coming back home to my family roots, which is in the trade union movement, but with a very integrated analysis that said, workers are not just workers. They don't just have issues at work, right? Certainly women, Black workers, immigrant workers have a huge set of issues that exist in the workplace, but they also exist when they punch the clock and leave the workplace. And again, to Josh's point, our ability as movements to integrate our issues is the only chance we stand to build the power required right now to stop the madness that's going on, frankly, all over the world, right? We've got 3% vaccination on the continent called Africa, and we've got people sitting in the United States who don't want to take a vaccine at all, and they're just sitting in refrigerators. So we really have a situation that requires a hell of a lot more power, frankly, than either of our movements have today. So what's the sort of lesson? For me, the most central life lesson that I learned primarily through experience and then had the pleasure of, I call taking a nap to do a PhD and write a book called No Shortcuts, Organizing for Power, where I really outlined the difference between mobilizing, which I'm going to talk about, and organizing. I think there's been a huge confusion, certainly among the left, of which I consider myself deeply a part of, but there's been a really profound confusion in the left about what's mobilizing and what's organizing. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes teasing it out. And I know there's going to be a bunch of sessions that get right into this coming weekend. And it's, again, super important that in moments when we feel challenged, we come together, break bread, and strategize and take comfort from people with whom we do agree. But a lot of what I'm going to talk about right now, and when I come back on Sunday with some trade union folks, is that that's not sufficient. It's not sufficient. Organizing, which is different than mobilizing. Organizing is about getting very, very comfortable, learning to have conversations with people with whom we don't agree. Central to the challenge that faces the left is getting our blinders off about where the base of the ranks are that we need to help bring into later mobilizing that we do, whether it's to take back control in the US, the Democratic Party, in your country of the Labor Party, inside of our trade unions, et cetera. They're different functions. And the role of the left needs to be to transform ourselves in part into thinking and acting like organizers, not only thinking and acting like activists. Right? Everyone who's going to come to the World Transformed, I think by definition, is going to be an activist. Our challenge is how do we get good at being comfortable with being uncomfortable when we talk to people who don't yet agree with us, who are not in our social media feeds, because that's the work ahead. And I think we've learned hard lessons coming off the Bernie Sanders campaigns, right? Almost parallel to the lessons that you will debate and learn, and we hope all of us are learning from in terms of the Corbyn project. And, there's been, as Josh mentioned, there's been some great victories along the way. At the end of the day, we're not winning right now. We're not winning a Green New Deal in the United States Congress. Biden is offering some nice commentary. He's introducing some legislation that sounds good, thank God, because Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Black women and immigrant women of power and our new squad in Congress are helping to drive a more progressive agenda in the Biden administration. But frankly, it's coming up short at the moment. And we are coming up short at the moment. So how do we think about organizing as different than mobilizing? And how do we really get into that this coming weekend? Which again, I think is sort of what is frankly urgent. One is we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Two, we actually have to learn the methods to do it. I think what Hope mentioned at the beginning, my work with Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, my work in the UK with trade unions in the UK and through the Rosa Luxemburg London office, is actually about what are the methods that can help make us successful to expand the ranks of people. That's what organizing is. We have to expand the universe of people from whom we can then bring to giant marches, from whom we can then do kill the bill work, from whom we can then march into the polls and say we're going to take our political parties back. That's the work in front of us. So organizing is definitely about something very different than mobilizing. We got to do our mobilizing well, but I think what we learned from the Sanders-Corbyn moment is we actually have to do more organizing to be successful at the mobilizing, right? And they go hand in hand. A lot of the best activist work, some of which Josh covered, is about holding the moral justice compass to institutions that I spend a lot of time with, which is trade unions, about what the priorities are of what we're working on, quite frankly. So the second thing, besides learning to get very comfortable, being uncomfortable, and being successful at moving people who are not yet among our ranks, who don't understand a lot of the rhetorical devices that we use in the left, is that we need way more power in the economic arena. The political structure the political structures in both our countries are kind of closing. Our Supreme Court's nuts. Your political structures and ours within our own parties are consistently moving to the right. The Democrats and the Labor Party, right, leadership is consistently moving to block the left inside the party. And I like to say to people, if we can't rebuild strong trade unions, and if we can't take control and build power and seize our two parties back, we're going to have a hell of a time trying to take control of the state, right? So as frustrating as it is, as much as they sabotage us, that's part of the game. And we got to win. And winning means we got to get it together in a really big way. And I am so excited about the conversations that you'll be having this weekend. And I hope you're getting tickets to show up at the World Transformed this weekend, where there'll be many really healthy discussions and debates about this. But so the second thing, besides getting comfortable being uncomfortable, is a serious focus on rebuilding strong trade unions and building really strong community-based organizations at the local level, which means knocking on doors of people who are not at all part of our movement, having deep conversations with them, and then actually building and developing real structures, real organizations that can help sustain the kind of recruitment efforts that we saw in both of our countries, but that weren't enough yet to get us over the finish line to stand a chance at stopping the madness of the climate crisis. So, and attacks on racism. I mean, for God's sakes, this morning in the United States, we woke up to images of Border Patrol on horseback whipping Black people, Haitian immigrants, under a bridge in Texas, right? There's insanity going on. So that we need to be stronger seems super clear to me. The question is how. And that's what part of this weekend is about. So I think I want to say just a couple of more teasers about the conversations that we desperately need to have among ourselves, and then how we sort of move out and see ourselves not just as activists committed to every important cause in the world, but how do we bring more people along? How can we actually do it? Inside the trade union movement, close with a couple of related points that are about Germany, the United Kingdom, and trade unions across the world right now. First of all, we're not going to win just by building unions strong in the United States, the UK, Germany, South Africa, Tanzania, Indonesia. These are all people who came into our recent course from all over the world. We're not even, I was so heartened to meet trade unionists from all over the world, including a deep participation in the global South. But all of us have work to do to sort of get out of the internal conversation we're having among leftists and get out and talk to people who are not yet engaged with us. But when I first came to the United Kingdom in 2014, as the guest of several wonderful trade union leaders, people said to me when I began to talk about what does it mean to build supermajority strikes, like we're a supermajority of people workers walk off the job, I got like one lecture after another. This has been true in Germany too. One lecture after another initially, like, yeah, but we don't have to do that here. You know, we can just do minority strikes. We can just walk out small numbers of people and strike and win some stuff. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I was already uncomfortable with that because I believe in 90, 95%, 100% strikes. That's what gets the goods in the United States of America. And people would say, yeah, we don't have to do that. And here's the fast forward. By 2 years later, hopefully there are young people here and coming. By 2 years later, in 2016, the trade union bill was passed in the United Kingdom. 2 years from when I first started saying, you've got to bring more people in the ranks into the trade union movement within the working class, or we can't build the power sufficient to stop the insanity. 2 years later in 2016, related to the Brexit votes that Cameron was pushing, was the trade union bill, which now says there has to be at least majority participation in a ballot to go out on strike in the United Kingdom. And right now, there's 30,000 workers in struggle in Berlin, Germany, and every day they're facing legal injunctions, which are quite odd in the German trade union context. That strike is going on now. They're at the bargaining table. I'm getting like minute-to-minute updates. So Germany is facing strange attacks on trade unions. The United Kingdom is facing strange attacks on trade unions. I'm going to wrap by saying we got to learn how to build supermajority structures and power. And we got to have way more activity in the economic arena, because the only thing that's going to make these capitalists across the world shut up and start taking power from us, and I mean, taking orders from our side, is when we can shut down production in services and manufacturing and beyond. So I'm super excited to see everybody again, to have a discussion a little bit more focused on what for with the trade union movement. But we know the attacks are coming everywhere, and all of us have to get stronger. Get your tickets. I look forward to seeing everybody again this weekend. So excited about the World Transformed. Hope you bring everyone, and it feels good because it's going to feel good to be around comrades.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jane. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that final comments. It's going to feel so good to be around so many amazing comrades, and I'm so excited. And yeah, thank you for such a kind of an honest, but I think an invigorating reminder of everything that we're up against, all of the many struggles and challenges we're faced moving forward, but also, of course, the opportunities and the pathways for organising and winning, but only if we seize them. By taking action. So thank you so much, Jane. So lovely to see you. And just to highlight kind of a few session spotlights for some of the stuff that Jane was talking about. So Jane mentioned the People's Vaccine campaign, extremely important, very, very pivotal moment right now that all of us need to be involved with. We're very excited to be hosting an international People's Vaccine rally at the festival, both in person and online, hosted by Global Justice Network and also National Nurses United USA. In terms of kind of union and organising related sessions, we've got Winning the 2020s Trade Union Industrial Strategy post-COVID, which Jane is zooming in for. We've got The Dust is Settling, Challenges and Opportunities for Changing the System. We've got Communities United, featuring community unions from 3 different nations coming together. Very excited for that one. We've got What is a Rank and File Strategy on Monday morning. We've got Striking to Win with the Momentum Trade Unionist Network on Sunday. And we've also got 2 key training strands at the festival, which will equip you with the skills to build power and take action once you leave the festival, whether it's in the Labour Party, in the workplace, or in the streets. So please do look out for the training strand. So that brings us towards the end of tonight's session. Thank you so much to all of our fantastic speakers for your thought-provoking and, I think, extremely energizing contributions. And of course, a big thanks to all of you who tuned in to join us on this Tuesday evening. It was so lovely to be with you all. I don't know about you guys, but I'm now definitely even more excited than I was before to join comrades old and new in Brighton this weekend and also online, to collectively plan where our movement goes next. And, you know, with an 80-seat Tory majority and a total absence of bold leadership from the opposition, it's up to us to forge a path forward and to advance transformative solutions to the multiple crises we face, whether it's deepening inequalities, racial injustice, or climate breakdown. Our movement desperately needs to come together to rebuild power from the ground up. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing at TWT 21. So remember, there's still time to get tickets. We have full 4-day tickets. We also have day tickets that have recently been launched. And of course, our online content passes as well. So there's many ways to get involved. So head to theworldtransformed.org to check out the program and to get your tickets. And if you can't join us, again, please do consider supporting us by making a donation so we can carry on doing radical political education, not just at future festivals, but all year round. So thank you so much. Have a great evening. And I hope to see many of you at the festival. Bye.